What about some of the other micronutrients, things like iron, zinc? How what role are they playing in terms of immune function?
Probably the three most important minerals are probably like iron, zinc, like you say, and also selenium.
Hmm.
Zinc probably, particularly important because we lose some zinc in sweat. We also use a little bit of iron in sweat, and iron status can be a problem potentially for female athletes in particular because of the menstrual blood losses. So the role that zinc plays is thought to be important because it's something that can actually inhibit viral adherence and replication inside your cells. Because viruses damage us by getting inside the cells using our own machinery, if you like, to reproduce themselves, both their nucleic acids and proteins within the cell. And zinc interferes with their ability to do that actually by inhibiting the enzyme that allows them to replicate their RNA. So zinc can be quite effective for that. And studies show that if you take zinc lozenges at the onset of cold symptoms, it does reduce the duration of symptoms. And having adequate zinc will also, theoretically at least, reduce your risk of picking up some viral infections. To a degree, the same can be said for selenium. That's also a component of some important antioxidant enzymes which actually improve what we call immune tolerance. So we have immune tolerance, we have immune resistance, and those two things work hand in hand together simultaneously to help stop bacteria either getting into the body or viruses getting into the body and starting to multiply, or making sure we don't kind of overreact to the infection in terms of our immune response, which can also in itself cause tissue damage and therefore symptoms of illness.
Yeah, I was going to segue into that. It's a perfect transition there in terms of immune resistance, immune tolerance. Mm-hmm. People will be familiar with these terms, but can you circle back there and define those and explain to us, how they work together to be able to balance out the immune system so we're responding appropriately to the infections?
Yeah, I mean, immune resistance is about being able to resist microorganisms like bacteria and viruses either getting into the body and gaining a foothold, or being able to kill them quite effectively and eliminate them once they have entered the body. Mm-hmm. So we normally respond to things once they've gotten into the body. We've got some first lines of defense like the barriers, the mucus secretions and things like that, which help defend us against things. I mean, immune resistance essentially determines your susceptibility to picking up infections, whereas immune tolerance is more to do with how you handle the infection as it starts to develop. An important thing that we've realized from infections like COVID is that you don't want an overreactive pro-inflammatory response because it just produces too much damage. You end up damaging your own tissues. In this case, of course, it's the lungs because it gets into your airways and the lungs, this COVID virus. So that's something you want to be able to control the infection, but you don't want to overreact to it. And that's what causes this awful, acute respiratory distress syndrome. Then you don't get enough oxygen into your blood because your lungs are filling up with fluid. The barrier that allows oxygen to come across becomes too thick, and you really struggle then, to get enough oxygen into the body. Your blood oxygen levels drop, and then your other organs are then starting to run into trouble: your heart, your liver, your kidneys, etc. So it's as we've seen, it's potentially fatal.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk high performance, we also think of obviously the coaching staff, the performance staff, and everybody else. And obviously, if you mentioned COVID in the last few years is where we're focused on and trying to obviously avoid it on the one hand, but it's difficult to avoid. So how well we respond to it and the severity of symptoms. And so with regards to something like immune tolerance, are there certain aspects of one's health, whether it's, weight, metabolic health, these types of things that can impact that immune tolerance and push us down, the certain side too heavily?
Yeah, I mean, the main things, and again, we've seen this from the COVID infections and the studies that have been done on the people who've had it. The ones who have the biggest problems are those with existing morbidities, that have type 2 diabetes or coronary heart disease or existing lung problems, those are the ones who fare worst. And often it's also associated simply with being overweight. In other words, having too much, an excess of adipose tissue, because this generates a pro-inflammatory environment in the body. When your fat cells get too big, they get stretched and they kind of release danger molecules that are signaling that something's going wrong. The tissue is being stretched, it's potentially going to be damaged. But it's just because you're getting too much fat accumulating in these cells. When that happens, the body treats it like, oh, it's a damaged tissue. So what do? You get white blood cells invading into the adipose tissue. They become activated. They produce pro-inflammatory cytokines, and these induce a pro-inflammatory state, which means if you get infected with something like COVID, then you're actually already primed for a very strong pro-inflammatory response. Awesome. And essentially that's when you get this over responsiveness of the immune system, which can be so damaging.
Yeah, it's amazing when that inflammatory noise gets to be so loud. And as you mentioned, you combine it with this type of infection, novel infection, then it can really cause problems, particularly in people with comorbidities and struggling with metabolic health. And obviously, as we've seen, the governments have really, rightfully so on the prevention side, whether it's the distancing, the masks, the travel mandates, etc. The other side of the coin with maintaining a robust immune system seems to be an area that we sort of missed out on, really, in terms of supporting the public in a sense of how do we help them have a better immune function with their fitness or diet or whatnot. Could you talk a little about nutrition or exercise, sleep for the general population or performance staff? I mean, even athletes, I guess, but for that general person, of how those things can help to support that robustness of your immune system.
Yeah, on the nutrition side, it's the most important thing really is to avoid any deficiencies in terms of protein that you consume, in terms of overall energy intake, which should really match your daily energy expenditure, so that you're in energy balance, and making sure you have all of those essential micronutrients that you need.
Yep.
Now, in addition to that, which can be obtained from eating a healthy, varied, balanced diet, of course, yep, you also get a very good, abundant and diverse gut microbiota, and that interacts a lot with the immune system. Like 70% of our immune system is located in and around the gut, which tells you there's something of importance going on there. And if you have a healthy gut microbiota, you can also help to support the immune system that way. I mean, one supplement that can perhaps help with that, and has been shown to reduce infection risk in athletes, as well as other things like allergies, is a daily intake of a probiotic supplement, essentially live bacteria that you're introducing into the gut, which mingle with your own bacteria. Some debate as to whether they actually colonize the gut, probably not to a significant extent, but they act as sort of signals which modify the immune cells in and around the gut, which can then diverge to other areas of the body, including the lungs, and other mucosal tissues, where most of our infections come in, either usually through what you've eaten or what you've breathed in. So that's on the diet side.
Yep.
And then, of course, there's the exercise. Well, it's good to do regular exercise because that actually induces an anti-inflammatory environment in the body through the release of things like anti-inflammatory cytokines, in terms of interleukin-6 or IL-6, which is actually released not from white blood cells, or it is released from white blood cells. It also released from contracting muscle fibers. Whenever you're doing prolonged exercise, because your glycogen levels go down, your IL-6 production and release from the muscle increases. That induces your white blood cells to produce interleukin-10, which is probably the most potent anti-inflammatory cytokine we know of. It burns fat, it reduces your fat stores, so it's bringing down that adipose tissue mass if you're a little bit overweight. It induces switching from pro-inflammatory to anti-inflammatory phenotypes of the white blood cells, both in the circulation and in the adipose tissue, reduces white blood cell infiltration into adipose tissue, which we just said generates some of these potential problems. And generally, if you do moderate exercise, you'll increase the numbers of white blood cells in your blood, but you won't actually inhibit their functions because you're not doing the intensities of exercise where you might actually get increased cortisol, stress hormone, epinephrine or adrenaline production, which tend to have negative effects temporarily on immune function. And then sleep as well, of course, getting good quality sleep and doing all the things you can do that to make sure you get a good night's sleep with very few interruptions. And that's really about creating the ideal environment for sleeping in your bedroom.